I was 34 when my father told me I wasn't really his daughter. It wasn't in a moment of quiet reflection or compassion. He said it like he was snapping off a branch he didn't want anymore, sharp, sudden, final. His exact words were, "Only blood relatives deserve the family fortune." I remember standing there, numb, the words ringing in my ears. My grandmother's funeral had been just 3 days earlier. Her scent still lingered in the old house, lavender and pipe smoke, and already my father was shifting gears from grief to greed. I asked him calmly, "Are you serious? You're really saying I don't belong because of biology?" He looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you're not my blood, then you don't get a cent. That's how Eleanor would have wanted it." Then I asked him something I didn't expect to say. "Do you promise to keep your word on that?" He raised his chin with the kind of certainty only someone absolutely sure of their power could have and replied, "Of course, it's about family, real family." That's when I knew something was wrong. Not just with the inheritance, with everything. Let me back up a bit. My name is Maya Hart. I'm a preservation architect from Portland. I specialize in restoring historical buildings, which is probably ironic considering my own family history was about to collapse like a condemned mansion. Until that day, I believed Daniel Hart was my biological father. I grew up in the kind of household where you had dinner at the same time every night, where expectations were posted between the lines of every conversation, and where being a Hart meant being part of something, whether you liked it or not. My brothers, Owen and Lucas, both fit the mold perfectly. Owen runs the family investment firm. Lucas is a corporate attorney in New York. I was the creative one, the one who liked history and art more than quarterly earnings. That made me different. That made me uncomfortable. Still, I never thought I was outside the family. Until that afternoon, when my father, Daniel, stood in my late grandmother's study and said the words that would unravel everything I thought I knew. "You're not even Eleanor's real granddaughter," he said. His voice was shaking, not with sadness, but anger. I looked around the room. Old portraits, thick books, and the chair where my grandmother used to sit and tell me stories. I remembered the way she would place her hand on mine and say, "We Harts don't always do things right, but we remember where we came from." I had believed her. I managed to say, "What are you even talking about?" "Your mother's..." "Little secret," he snapped. "It's out. You're not my daughter, so you're not a Hart. And when the will gets read next week, don't expect to be included. I've already spoken to the lawyers." The lawyer in question was Gregory Nash, a longtime friend of his and someone I never really trusted. That night, I got a text from my mom. It simply said, "We need to talk. Alone." I stared at the message, the knot in my stomach growing tighter. If Daniel Hart wasn't my father, who was? And more importantly, why now? Why did this come? Out right after Eleanor's death? And how deep did this secret actually go? I didn't have answers, but I had questions. And I knew this was only the beginning. The library felt different after that conversation. It used to be my favorite room in the house. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, the smell of old paper and cedar, the hush of a place where time stood still. But now, standing there alone, it felt like a courtroom. Like the books were witnesses, and I was waiting for a verdict I didn't ask for. This was the room where Eleanor taught me how to spot a forged signature on a historic deed, where we drank tea on rainy Sundays and talked about how people disappear, not just physically, but from records, from memory, from their own stories, and now I was being erased. I tried to make sense of what my father had said. Or Daniel, I guess. It still felt wrong calling him anything else. His words rang louder now in the silence. Only blood relatives deserve the family fortune. But this wasn't just about money. Eleanor and I had a connection. She called me her legacy. She told me stories about her parents, her travels, her regrets, and how she wanted her estate to reflect the things that actually mattered, not just bloodlines and business portfolios. I wasn't imagining that. I couldn't be. So why was Daniel so eager to shut me out? The answer was simple. Control. He wanted it all. And whatever Eleanor had planned, he saw me as a threat to that plan. I didn't even know what was in the will. None of us did. But whatever it was, he was already working behind the scenes with Nash to challenge it, using my identity as his weapon. I sat down at Eleanor's desk, trying to feel closer to her. The surface was perfectly clean, polished like always. But the drawers were still locked. She'd told me once that she kept her most important documents somewhere nobody would think to look. Somewhere she'd always find them. I opened the bottom drawer and ran my fingers along the back panel. There was a ridge, a barely noticeable seam. I pressed gently, and the panel gave way. Inside was a small envelope, cream-colored, no address. Just my name written in Eleanor's handwriting. I opened it slowly, my breath caught halfway in my throat. It wasn't long, just a few lines. Maya. Trust your instincts. The truth always finds a way out. You are exactly who I thought you were. Don't let anyone take that from you. It wasn't evidence, it wasn't legal, but it was everything. I held the letter in my lap, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Who was I really? If Daniel wasn't my biological father, was my connection to Eleanor gone? Or was it deeper than the blood he was so desperate to prove didn't exist? The questions were growing faster than the answers, and I had to be smart now. Every move mattered. The reading was in 5 days. If I was going to protect what Eleanor meant to leave behind, not just for me, but for what she stood for, I needed to get ahead of this. That meant going straight to the only person who might tell me the truth. My mother. I didn't sleep. That night. I kept staring at the photograph. That name, James, looped through my mind like a song I didn't know the lyrics to. The handwriting was definitely Eleanor's, and the baby. That was me. No doubt about it. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I texted my mom, "Can we talk today? Just us." She replied almost instantly, "I was hoping you'd ask." 2 p.m. at Carlisle's? Carlisle's was her favorite cafe. It had been for years. Tucked on a quiet corner downtown, with mismatched chairs and coffee that tasted like it had something to prove. I used to love going there with her as a teenager. But that day, the place felt unfamiliar. She was already seated when I arrived, clutching a mug like it was anchoring her to the table. Her makeup was minimal, her clothes more casual than usual. It wasn't the version of her she showed to the world. It was the version I rarely got to see. Unfiltered, anxious, real. I sat down across from her. "You know why I'm here," I said. She nodded slowly. "I never wanted it to come out this way." "But it's true?" My voice was low. "Daniel's not my biological father?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "No, he's not." I let the silence stretch. I needed her to speak first. "It was complicated," she began. "More than you probably want to know, but I'll try to explain." I said nothing. She continued. "James and I were in love when we were young. He was different, brilliant, kind. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. We had plans, talked about moving to Boston together after he finished med school. What happened? He got offered a fellowship in London. We thought we could make it work long distance. But we were young. It was hard. I missed him. And Daniel, he'd always been there, in the background. He wasn't like James, but he was reliable, solid." She paused, took a shaky breath. "I made a mistake. I slept with Daniel, just once, a moment of weakness. But I ended things almost immediately. I knew I still loved James." "When did you find out you were pregnant?" "A few weeks later. I was sure it was James's child. The timing made sense. But Daniel insisted it was his. And when James came home briefly with news of his engagement to someone else, I couldn't bring myself to tell him. I felt my heart twisting in my chest. I was scared," she said quietly. "I was young, alone. And Daniel offered to marry me. He promised to raise you as his own. So you went along with it." She nodded. "I thought it was the right thing. For everyone." I pulled the photograph from my bag and slid it across the table. "Do you remember this?" Her face froze. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. In the library. In a chest I never thought to open. Her fingers brushed over the image and she closed her eyes. Eleanor knew, she said after a long pause. She always knew. She wrote me a letter, told me to trust my instincts. She was the only one who ever told me not to feel ashamed. She said family was about truth, not appearances. But she also promised to stay out of it, unless it became necessary. Well, I said, it's necessary now. My mom nodded. You have every right to know the truth. Does James know? No, she whispered. I never told him. I thought I was protecting him. And you. I leaned back, processing the weight of it all. So what happens now? That depends on what you want, Maya. Do you want to find James? Do you want to fight Daniel? I don't know. Yet, I admitted. But I do know one thing. What's that? I'm tired of pretending. I want the truth, and I'm going to find it. I didn't wait long to act. The next morning, I called in a favor from a colleague who'd worked on restoration projects in the medical district. He gave me James's office address. Apparently, he'd moved back to Portland 2 years ago, quietly, after his research lab in Boston shut down. I never even knew. I kept my message simple. James, this is Maya. I'd like to talk. It's about Eleanor. And possibly about me. He replied just a few hours later. Of course. Tomorrow morning at my place. 10 a.m. The address was in a quiet neighborhood not far from the university. When I arrived, the house looked nothing like the estate I'd grown up in. No gates, no polished stone columns, just a modest craftsman-style home with overgrown ivy and a garden that looked more like nature was winning. James opened the door with a curious expression. Older than I remembered, early 60s now, but there was something familiar in his eyes. A warmth, a softness, and something else. A flicker of recognition that unsettled me. He ushered me into the living room. Books everywhere, framed photographs of places he'd traveled, a few medical journals scattered across a worn coffee table. Thanks for seeing me, I said, trying to hide the shake in my voice. You mentioned Eleanor, he said gently. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear her name until just now. I nodded. She's gone. He closed his eyes briefly. I know. I didn't make the funeral. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. You would have been. By her, at least. I pulled the photo from my bag, the same one I'd shown my mom, and handed it to him. His face didn't change much, but he stared at it for a long time. I remember this, he said. That summer, we were all at Eleanor's beach house. You're holding me, I said, and standing next to my mom. He nodded. You were just a few months old. Then I asked the question I had rehearsed 100 times. Did you and my mom, were you together? He didn't flinch. Yes. We were serious for a few years. I thought we were headed toward marriage. Then she ended it quickly. No real explanation. She said you were going to London. I was, but I came back and she was married, to Daniel. I looked him straight in the eye. She says she believes I'm your daughter. James didn't move. And what do you believe? I don't know what to believe, but I need to find out. He stood and walked to a small cabinet by the window, pulled out a file folder and handed it to me. Inside was a DNA test request. Blank. I ordered this years ago, he said, after Eleanor made a comment that stuck with me. I never used it. I didn't want to go digging. I figured if it was meant to come out, it would. Well, I said, it's out. We agreed to do the test that day. Quietly, discreetly. I wanted answers, but I also didn't want to tip off Daniel or Gregory Nash too soon. We used a private lab. No online portals, no mailed kits. James knew a contact who could handle it personally. He'd built enough trust over the years in his field to keep it clean. As I left his house, test sample in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor passed. Hope. Not just for the inheritance, but for clarity, for truth, for the possibility that the connection I felt with Eleanor hadn't been imagined, but inherited. Maybe the story I'd been told my whole life wasn't just flawed. Maybe it was fiction. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally about to find the real beginning. The waiting was the worst part. We were told it would take 3 days, 72 hours to get a result that could rewrite my entire life. But time felt different now. Every hour stretched thin, every silence felt loaded. My phone became a lifeline, buzzing occasionally with things that didn't matter, notifications, updates, distractions, but not the result. I tried to focus on work, even opened a few design drafts, but my mind wouldn't stay still. I found myself replaying memories I hadn't thought of in years, tiny moments that suddenly felt suspicious or important. I remembered how Daniel never called me by pet names like he did with my brothers, how his praise always came with a condition, how he seemed almost annoyed by my closeness with Eleanor. Maybe he always knew. Maybe that's why he was so quick to throw me out of the family, because in his mind, I never really belonged. By the second day, I couldn't sit still. I drove to Eleanor's estate, even though there was no reason to be there. I just needed to feel close to her. I wandered the halls, revisiting the rooms that shaped my childhood. Her scent still clung to the curtains. Her voice echoed faintly in my memory. I ended up in the sitting room, the one she only used for guests. The room had always felt formal, but now it felt like a museum, frozen in time. There was a small table near the window, with a locked drawer I'd never tried to open. I knelt beside it, unsure why. Maybe it was a hunch, or maybe I was desperate for anything that made me feel like I wasn't imagining this whole unraveling. The key was taped underneath. Typical Eleanor, never careless, but always clever. Inside the drawer was a stack of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. I pulled out the first one. Dated back to when I was 6. Each letter was different. Some were simple stories, some were life advice. But they all had one thing in common: an unshakable belief in me, in who I was, who I could be. One line from a letter dated 5 years. Ego stopped me cold. Maya, no matter what the world tries to tell you, you belong. You always have. She knew. She definitely knew. I stayed there for hours, reading, crying sometimes, laughing once or twice. I didn't realize how hungry I'd been for something real, something solid, something that didn't feel like a lie. The third day, I got the call. It was James. I have the results, he said. His voice was calm, but something in it made my heart pound. I didn't ask what it said. I drove straight to his house. He handed me the envelope when I walked in. No small talk, no ceremony. You should be the one to open it, he said. My hands were shaking. I peeled it open slowly, eyes scanning the page until I found the line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 99.9999998%. James was my father. Everything else on the page blurred. He sat across from me, watching. I could barely look up. But when I did, he wasn't crying. He wasn't stunned. He was smiling. Like something inside him had finally settled. I thought so, he said, quietly. There's always been something about you. You laugh like your mother, but your eyes, those are mine. I didn't know what to say. The confirmation hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was surprising, but because it was real. I wasn't just guessing anymore. I wasn't outside the family. I was a heart. Just not Daniel's version. Not his mold, not his mistake, but something entirely my own. We sat there for a while in silence. Then James said, "What now?" I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Now, I will show them the truth. The fallout started before I could even share the truth. The day after the DNA results came in, I received a formal letter from Gregory Nash's office. It was stiff, filled with legal language, but the message was clear. My eligibility to inherit anything from Eleanor's estate was under review due to recent concerns regarding lineage. In other words, Daniel was already moving to cut me out. He was fast, almost like he'd been preparing for this moment long before it happened. Maybe he had. I didn't tell him about the DNA results right away. I wanted to gather more, understand, exactly what I was walking into. So I went to someone I hadn't expected to trust, Bernard Kim, Eleanor's personal attorney. Unlike Gregory, Bernard had no ties to Daniel. Eleanor kept him separate, quiet, out of the family web. Now I understand why. His office was tucked inside an old building downtown, filled with file cabinets and the quiet hum of people who still believed in paper trails. "I was wondering when I'd see you," Bernard said when I walked in. "Eleanor told me you might come." That stopped me. "She said you'd be looking for the truth," he added. "She wanted me to help you when the time came." I showed him the DNA result. He nodded. "That's about what I expected." "You knew?" "I suspected. Eleanor never told me directly, but she was deliberate in how she structured her estate. There are provisions, layers of protection, if you will. Can Daniel override them? That depends. There are two parts to the estate: Eleanor's personal assets, which she had full control over, and the family trust, which is governed by more rigid rules. Rules Daniel knows, but might not fully understand. He pulled out a document from his drawer and slid it across the desk. This is a copy of the original trust, created by Eleanor's father. It specifies that beneficiaries must be direct bloodline descendants of the Blackwell, now Hart, line. That's what Daniel is clinging to. But he thinks I'm not blood. Exactly. Which gives him leverage. If your connection to Eleanor comes through James, and if Eleanor believed that wasn't part of the approved lineage, he could argue to have your name removed from the trust's distributions. I nodded. But what if I have proof I am part of that bloodline? What if James is Eleanor's biological son? Bernard smiled faintly. Then the argument flips. It hit me like a wave. Wait, are you saying Daniel isn't... Bernard raised a hand. Let's just say not everything in the Hart family tree is as solid as it looks on paper. Eleanor was careful. She left breadcrumbs, just in case. I felt the pieces begin to shift. Is there anything I can use to delay Daniel's challenge? He nodded. You can file for a review of the trust conditions. If there's a dispute about biological relations, the court will want clarity. That could buy you time. But more importantly, it could open the door to challenge Daniel's own status. It was almost too much. In trying to erase me, Daniel might have exposed himself. I left Bernard's office with a new fire in my chest. I'd spent my life trying not to make waves. But this wasn't about politeness. It was about what was fair. And I was done playing by Daniel's rules. That evening, my mother called. Daniel knows, she said. Her voice was tight. He found out about the test. How? He has contacts everywhere. He's furious. I don't care. You should, she warned. He's dangerous when he feels cornered. I'm not afraid of him anymore. I meant it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. The morning of the will reading arrived like the quiet before a storm. I dressed simply. No designer coat, no bold statement. I wanted to show up as myself, not the version of Maya Hart they'd spent years shaping or pushing out. Just me. The one Eleanor believed in. The one who knew the truth now and wasn't going to back down from it. James picked me up. He'd offered to come in separately, but we agreed it would send a stronger message if we arrived together. And to be honest, I didn't want to face that room alone. Eleanor's estate looked the same from the outside, majestic and calm, but there was tension in the air the second we stepped through the front doors. My brothers were already there. Owen gave me a wary nod. Lucas wouldn't meet my eyes. And Daniel? He sat at the head of the long dining table, perfectly composed, as if he'd already won. Gregory Nash stood beside him, holding a leather folder. We took our seats. I'd like to begin, Gregory said, his voice steady. As Eleanor Hart's legal representative, I'll be facilitating the reading of her last will and testament. He cleared his throat and began reading aloud. The language was formal, precise. Eleanor had divided her estate into two categories: her personal assets and the holdings protected under the Hart family trust. Most of the minor bequests went as expected. Charities, a few loyal staff members, personal belongings to specific relatives. Then, Gregory paused. And to my granddaughter Maya Hart, I leave, Daniel cut in. Excuse me, I must object. Maya is not my biological daughter and therefore not a legitimate heir under the trust. There it was. He didn't even wait. He wanted it on the record. And Gregory looked prepared for it, like they had rehearsed this. I reached into my bag and pulled out the DNA results, calmly, quietly. James is my biological father, I said. That makes me Eleanor's granddaughter by blood. Gasps rippled through the room. Owen blinked. Lucas looked stunned. Daniel laughed, but it was thin. This is nonsense. Manufactured. It proves nothing. Gregory opened the envelope. His eyes skimmed the page. He swallowed. This test is certified. The results are clear. James stood. I'd like to say something. Gregory hesitated, then nodded. Eleanor knew, James said. She always knew who Maya was. That's why she named her in this will. Daniel's attempt to disqualify her is based on a narrow interpretation of bloodline, one that doesn't account for the truth. Daniel's voice turned cold. And how convenient that you're stepping in now, trying to rewrite the family structure in your favor. James didn't flinch. The structure was broken long before now. Eleanor saw it, and she left measures in place to fix it. That's when Bernard Kim walked in. Gregory faltered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Sorry for the delay, Bernard said. Eleanor requested I be present for the formal execution of her personal estate instructions. I also have a sealed letter. From her to be read only if matters of bloodline are disputed. Gregory went pale. Bernard opened the letter. It was short, clear. Maya is the biological daughter of James Hart. She is my granddaughter by blood and my choice by heart. Her place in this family is not up for debate. The room went still. Daniel stood abruptly. This isn't finished. He turned to go, but Bernard stopped him with one final blow. There's also a matter regarding your status, Daniel, Bernard said calmly. Eleanor knew you were adopted. The trust requires bloodline descent from the original Hart lineage. Your challenge has opened the door for your own disqualification. The words hit harder than anything else that day. He froze. All the color drained from his face. His foundation, the one he'd tried to use to remove me, was now shaking under him. For once, Daniel Hart had nothing to say. After the will reading, no one really knew what to say. Owen approached me first. His voice was low. I didn't know about any of it. I nodded. I didn't either, until recently. Lucas stood behind him, arms crossed, trying to process everything. He lied to us too, he finally said. All those years, acting like he was the only one who mattered. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange kind of relief. The mask had come off, and what was left behind wasn't worth chasing. James stayed with me while Bernard finalized the paperwork. Eleanor had made sure everything was airtight. Her personal assets, which made up the bulk of her estate, were legally outside of the family trust. She had ensured that whatever challenge Daniel might launch wouldn't be enough to undo what she wanted, and what she wanted, clearly, deliberately, was for me to inherit her legacy. Daniel left without another word. Gregory trailed behind him, red-faced and silent. The others stayed behind, quiet, stunned. Later that evening, I walked back through the house with James. The rooms looked the same, but the energy had shifted. It no longer felt like a place I was visiting. It felt like a place I could finally belong to. You all right? He asked. I think so, I said. It's just a lot. I know. We sat in the study, surrounded by the books Eleanor loved. James looked around with quiet reverence. She really did prepare for everything. She knew him better than we did, I said, and she didn't want him to win. James nodded. Neither do I. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small box. Inside was a key. To the beach house, he said. Eleanor wanted you to have it. She told me a long time ago. When the truth finally comes out, give her the place where she learned to listen. I smiled, unexpectedly emotional. That house was the first place I remember feeling free, I whispered. Then it's yours, he said. All of it is. Not just the property, the stories, the memories, the truth. We sat in silence for a while, just existing in the calm after the storm. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the floor, I thought about everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. Eleanor was gone. The secrets were out, but the core of who I was hadn't shifted. If anything, it had solidified. I wasn't Daniel's daughter, but I was a heart. By blood, yes. But more importantly, by choice. By the people who saw me, fought for me, believe in me. In the end, that was what really mattered. Not the money, not the house, not even the victory over Daniel. What mattered was knowing I belonged, not because someone gave me permission, but because someone made space for me to claim it on my own. 6 months later, the house was quiet in a different way. Not with tension or secrets, but with peace. I've made a lot of decisions since reading. I kept the estate, but turned half of the land into a preservation project, something Eleanor would have loved. The beach house became my retreat. And James? He became part of my life in a way I never thought possible. Not just a name on a DNA report, but my father. Owen and Lucas started coming around more, slowly, cautiously, not to fix things overnight, but to try. And that was enough. As for Daniel, he filed an appeal, but it went nowhere. The courts ruled in favor of Eleanor's wishes, and with Bernard's careful planning, his challenge collapsed under the very argument he tried to use against me. I never heard from him again. I don't know where he went, and honestly, I don't care. Because this story wasn't about him. It was about finding out who I really was, beyond a name, beyond a will, beyond blood, and finally realizing that my place in this family was never about being chosen. It was about claiming it for myself. And now it's mine.